Yo, I'm Brendan. The 401k can be a powerhouse for your financial life and the backbone of your retirement plan if you use it correctly. So today I'm going to share with you 5 401k mistakes that we've all got to avoid. And let's talk about the elephant in the room first. It's not just our savings rate and our income that's the biggest problem. Yeah, duh, we all know that we would have more money if we invested more. If we had more to start with and we shoveled a bunch in there, we would have more. That's as obvious as saying that I'd have a six-pack again if I refrained from eating 8 peanut butter cookies a day. But the difference is I don't expect to see my abs anytime soon. And a lot of millennials and Gen Z workers have crazy expectations about their financial future. Millennials, my generation, are slightly more realistic than the youngsters coming after us, but we're still delusional. More than a third of millennials think that we can retire on less than $1 million. And 41% of us think that we're going to retire early. Despite all that optimism, the average total amount that millennials have saved for retirement is about $60,000. So when millennials in 2024 are aged between 28 and 43 years old, that means that we only have 10 or 15 years to 10x our money, to go from 60 grand to over 600 grand. But Gen Z are even crazier. I will hand it to all my friends who are Gen Z. You're an inspiring and optimistic generation, except when it comes to retirement savings, because you're way too optimistic. When surveyed, almost half, that's 45% of Gen Z believe they can retire on under $1 million. But here's the real outlandish data. 40% think they're going to retire early, which is about the same as millennials. But the crazy part is that 14% of Gen Z think they're going to retire in their 40s. So we have this chunk of the population in Gen Z who are likely to live to upwards of 90, 100 years old, think they're going to retire in their 40s and survive for 50 or 60 years in retirement with, 500 grand? Are you kidding me, bruh? Especially because the average Gen Z saver has only $5,000 in their 401k. No cap. Whatever math we use to expect to retire early, Gen Z fam, it's sus. So with all that to be said, what can we do differently to avoid mistakes and help our financial dreams come true? Because the amazing thing is, both Gen Z and millennials actually do have time to make their expectations a reality if we do the right things as soon as possible. Mistake number 1 to avoid to make that happen is waiting to start using your 401k because you're just not sure yet, or you don't know how it works, or some other kind of cheesy excuse that's not really a worthwhile excuse. Like one of my coaches used to say, shit or get off the pot. Especially if you're not investing at all, and this would be the first time you're investing some kind of money, this is a major problem that's setting back your financial freedom date massively. In general, all our investing data supports the philosophy that the earlier you start, the more money you end up with because your money has more time to grow. So if we want to retire early or if we want to retire at all, we've got to get started. If the 401k is confusing and nasty and complicated to you, do enough research that it makes sense to you and then decide if it's right for you or not. You don't have to use a 401k. There's a lot of good options out there. The point is we just got to get investing in something. Mistake number 2 is not taking advantage of the full employer match whenever you have one presented to you. And this is a double whammy. If you pair this with number 1, because you're not investing at all, if you're doing mistake number 1, you're definitely not taking advantage of the full match. So for example, one of the matches that I had access to in my past life as a W-2 employee is a 50% match on the first 6% of your salary that you contribute. So that meant that the match worked out to be 3% of your salary, but only if you yourself saved 6%. So it's sort of one of those dangling carrots that says, hey, if you double the skin in the game, then we'll match you up to 3%, but you've got to commit more than we do, essentially. It wasn't like a 100% percentage for percentage match. And so if you've got a situation like that at your work where maybe it's percentage for percentage up to 1 or 2%, but then to get the full match, you've got to invest even more, and you're not taking the free money, you're rationalizing it in your head somehow, then you got to listen to what Gandalf says here.
Take the free money.
So when the average 401k match in 2024 is between 4 to 6% of your compensation, you're missing out on an immediate, or even if it's an investing schedule, a very quick 100% return on that money that you're contributing. In my mind, the way I always looked at a 401k match was it was like an immediate bonus, but instead of me having the money today, it was a bonus for my future self. And the difference was someone saying, do you want the bonus or not? Like, would you turn down a real bonus in terms of like, whatever, $1,000, $2,000 today? No, you'd be crazy to do that. So why are we turning down a bonus in our 401k account? Mistake number 3 is probably the most tragic one. This is a heartbreaking one. It's contributing money to your account, but never actually choosing an investment for that money. So this would be like having cookie dough, being so excited about the result of your actions of putting it in the oven, but then never turning the oven on. So it just sits there at room temperature and gets all squishy and soft and probably isn't safe to eat anymore. And you got to throw it away, but you eat a little bit anyway. Nothing good is going to happen from this. Yet this is an extremely extremely common mistake. And I think part of the confusion comes because not everybody understands that whenever we send money into an investing account, sometimes it has to sit in like a holding account first. And then whenever you choose a place for it to get invested in, then sometimes it's automatically sent there because you've chosen a destination. But sometimes you actually have to manually like move it and say, buy this investment now. And so you've got to make sure that the money that you're sending in there is actually being invested. But I have a confession because my wife and I weren't doing this properly in one of our accounts. So don't think I'm just here to point the finger. My wife and I had been accidentally doing this with our health savings account for the last few years. So we both just thought that the money was being invested in the stock market already. I didn't set up the account. I didn't know for sure. She thought it was. We both just kind of assumed. But as it turns out, the money was just sitting there in a holding account, making us no money, no profit, not growing. And we've been missing out on some pretty amazing years in the stock market lately. And it was only whenever I logged into our account and looked it up and saw that it was just sitting there and there was no investment elections made. There was no profit to speak of. It was just stagnant. That I went, oh my gosh, we've got to change this. We've got to do something and pick an actual investment to put this money into. So the same thing could be true for your 401k. If it's been a while since you've logged into your account, or maybe you never have, I say jump in there and just make absolutely sure that your money's being invested. And if you're hearing this and you're like, I don't even know how to tell if it's being invested or not, I'd say no problem. Just ask your HR person at work or call the support number for the financial company that's actually hosting your 401k and just ask them to either take a look at it with you or ask them to say, hey, how do I know with our account that I have money invested here? Mistake number 4 is happening more and more commonly these days, and that's taking out loans against your 401k. I think that whenever we're young, we just don't really spend much time thinking about the future hardships in life that could be coming. And so we don't even think about the possibility of needing to have a loan for our 401k. And we don't think about that possibility of doing that and then wrecking our future retirement as a result. And so it just sort of glosses over us. And then when the time comes that we're actually in trouble, we go, oh crap, I've got to find some money somewhere. And we grab the 401k money, and this is a big mistake. The only way that we can secure our financial future when it comes to retirement savings and to have a hope of potentially retiring early, like a lot of Gen Z and millennials want to do, is leave the money alone. Do not touch it. Never withdraw a dime from it until it actually comes time to retire. And the only way that I know how to do that is to set up the rest of your financial life to support you and to protect that invested money. And instead have an emergency fund. Instead have a budget that allows us to have some leeway in our lifestyle so that if something happens and we need some money, then we've got another place to pull from, or maybe we've been saving up for a while to be able to cover that cost instead of having to pull money out of the 401k loan. And the difference between pulling money out in terms of a 401k loan versus taking out an actual withdrawal is that when the withdrawal happens, it's not a loan, you typically get with penalties and taxes for that. Technically, if you pay back a 401k loan on time, then you don't get hit with those penalties or taxes. But it's important to note that that money's still not free. Typically, the requirement is that you've got 5 years to pay back the money plus interest. So it's not like it's some free loan from the bank of yourself. You're actually paying interest on this just like if you got a loan from somewhere else. I think the game here isn't trying to find what's the best loan, what's the cheapest version, because obviously a credit card or a payday lending place or something like that is going to hose us the most. That's the highest interest rate. So if you're trying to decide between that and your 401k, maybe the 401k seems like a pretty decent plan, especially when you have 5 years to pay it back. But I think the best option we have is to treat it like it's not an option in the first place. I think a $15,000 emergency fund would end up covering almost all of the reasons why these typical people are taking out 401k loans. And that way your retirement is totally protected and your odds of retiring or retiring early are intact. Now I have 2 more mistakes to share with you, and that's actually 6, but I want to give you a little bit extra. Mistake number 5 is not checking on your fees. And there's a couple different kinds of fees that I wanted you to kind of investigate here if you can. The first is expense ratios. These are just the fees that come with investing in something like an ETF or an index fund or maybe a target date fund. And these will vary largely just depending on what you have access to through your 401k. I know with both my wife and I, whenever we were picking our investment elections for what to invest in with our 401k, it was a little bit depressing how few options you had. I think we both had somewhere between 20 and 40 things to choose from, and that was it. And there's obviously thousands of options open to us outside of a 401k. And so you're really kind of funneled down and dependent on what's available in your own plan. And so what you can do is log into your account or pull out a statement and see what you're investing in. And if you have a high expense ratio now, you have the option of finding something else that could have a similar kind of investing philosophy for you. Maybe you want to be conservative or more aggressive, whatever that is. You can find something similar that might have a smaller expense ratio, and that immediately bumps up your potential for higher returns. Because even though no one can tell the future of what's going to happen in the stock market, we know for a fact that you're going to get charged that expense ratio. The other kind of fee that we have to be aware of with a 401k is potentially high management fees. And a lot of people that don't like a 401k claim that all 401ks have crazy management fees. It's a scam. Don't use them. They're trying to trick you. It's always the man against you. With both the expense ratios and the management fees, high is like a relative term. It depends on you. It depends on what you're okay with. Typically for me, anything over 0.5 percentage point is high. but you've got to define that for yourself. For me personally, even if I did have high management fees in my 401k, I would still get the full match. Because where else are you going to get a 100% return? You're just not. Let's say, for example, you've got a 1.5% management fee and all the expense ratios in your plan are really high too. They're 1%. So maybe for you at that point, it doesn't justify investing any more money over and above what you'd get the full match for. In that case, you can invest in something like an IRA. You can find something where you have a lot more control over the fees and a lot more investment options. And so that way you can invest more money and keep your fees in an absolute minimum. There are services out there that can help you look up your own management fees because in my experience, I tried to do this on my own and I just couldn't sort my way through all the paperwork and figure out what the heck the difference is. There's some account fee here and some management fee there, and I couldn't kind of collate that down into one defined number. So I had a hard time discovering what that was for me. But we ended up using one of these services to take a look at our 401k plan and just tell us whether or not they thought it was a scammy amount of fees or not. I don't like using that word scam unless it's really warranted, but it wasn't an overly aggressive amount of fees. And so I had no problem investing there. But regardless of the structure of your fees, of your expense ratios, of all that kind of stuff that people like to complain about, mistake number 6 absolves all of that. Because if you're not investing aggressively, if you're not giving your all in terms of how much money that you can shovel into that account as early as humanly possible, we shouldn't even be having this discussion. If you're putting in $50 a month into your account and you're sweating over an ETF fee, or you're sweating it over a 0.89% management fee, this is not the weak link in the equation. But to whatever degree possible, we've got to be investing as much money as early as humanly possible to give us the most time to have the most gains. That's the most critical thing that we have control over ourselves. While we're on the topic of 401ks and investing in them, I've got a video right here that you can watch next that's basically the history of me having invested in my own 401k at my previous job for the last 10 years. And I talk about things like the fees and whether or not I thought it was a scam. And then if you ever decide to leave your job, it's important to watch this video next because it's talking about what it means to keep your 401k after you leave. There's millions of people out there who completely forget or they don't realize that they can keep their 401k money and the money just sits there. They never take advantage of it. And in the meantime, we've got this retirement crisis going on. So if you want to learn about keeping your 401k, watch this video next. And otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow.